Hello plant people, how are you guys doing today? If you're new around here, my name is Ashley and I'm a soil scientist. On this channel, I like to take that science and apply it to all things plants. And in today's video, we're talking about something that I was genuinely confused about when I first started gardening. Genuinely. My first year home alone, out of the house, on my own, without the help of my gardening grandmother genius, I screwed this up. And that is the topic of onions. Seeds versus bulbs. I thought this was the appropriate time to actually do this video on onions versus bulbs, or seeds versus bulbs, mostly because if you are doing onions from seed, you need to get that in and planted right now. And I'm dead serious. I don't care what zone you're in. You could be in zone 2. You need to get them in the ground and you need to get them planted because they need a relatively large growing season. And not only that, they like cold soil. So if you are in one of the higher zones, say you're in, I have some followers from zone 9, I believe. So if you guys want your onion seeds, start them now. You probably should have even started them sooner than that because they like that cold soil to survive in. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but we want to get them started now. So my story about this, seeds versus bulbs. When I started my first garden, Grandma, if you're watching this, comment down below, but my grandma almost burst out laughing when she came over and she saw all my seeds started and she noticed a ridiculous amount of onion plants everywhere. And she's like, what's going on here? What is this? And I was like, oh, they're onions. I started my onions. And she's like, are you nuts? These take forever to get going. And you started them way too late and you should be doing bulbs anyways. So it actually got me to thinking, what is the difference between seeds and bulbs? And I clued in like, yeah, of course there is bulbs. They're actually not called bulbs. They're called sets. But anyways, the little bulbous things. And I was like, well, yeah, what are those? Total blonde moment on my part. But since then, I've only used bulbs. The number one reason being I do not have the room for anything else. My upstairs is our living quarters in the house, and therefore all my sun that I have is taken up by human activity. The only grow lights I have are pretty much the ones you see behind me. Other than that, I don't have anything else. And then the other majority of my plants have to be put out in a greenhouse for the beginning portion of the year with a heater, because that's how cold it can get where I am in April. So I don't have a ton of room. And due to the fact that I don't have a ton of room, the idea of starting onions indoors early, it just doesn't entertain me whatsoever, considering you can get an entire ginormous bag the size and weight of me for about $6 at the local Costco in my area. So I have no interest in seeds, but you may have interest in seeds. So let's jump into what it means to do seeds versus bulbs, the benefits, the downfalls, and when you would put either one of these outdoors. The best way to understand this is to look at onions and what they do. So they are actually a biannual plant. And by biannual, that means that the first year we are working mostly on bulb formation and the upper foliage portion of the plant. And then the second year would be the year that we focus on flowering. So if we were using this as a flower plant, for example, it would be considered a biannual. We would leave it in the ground for a cycle of 2 years in order to get the pretty flowers on top. So for you to get your onion seeds, the grower or the supplier you're purchasing these from has to take 2 years out of their garden to be able to produce the flower to gain the seeds. So it is a biannual crop. If we are using seeds, we plant them in the ground and they can take upwards of 110 to 120 days start to finish. So you're going to want to start them as early in the year as possible. That would be considered the first growing year, and then you would actually harvest them at the end of the first growing year so that they don't end up setting seed. However, in a lot of the zones in Canada and even some of the zones in the United States, it gets a little bit too cold for it even to be a perennial or biannual crop anyways. It's simply just going to it's not going to regrow the next year. It's going to get way too cold and it's just going to turn to mush. But that first year, you are going to harvest. The big thing with the seed is that it's obviously going to take up room indoors, and then you're going to want to actually plant them outside. The first moment you end up with no frost at night, so meaning that upper foliage isn't going to get frostbitten or any sort of frost damage. The bottom portion of the plant obviously is not going to be damaged because it is going to be underground. The second option you can try, they are also considered seed grown, would be something called plugs, and you can actually get these from a nursery, and they kind of look like green onions, but they are onions in the early stages. These are ones that are started by the nursery that you then purchase, and then you put the plants into the ground. Both of these are the same scenario. What will happen if you choose to start onions from seeds is you will get larger bulbs, and there's a lot of thought behind the why of this, but what it comes down to is there's less stress on the plant when you're planting it from seed rather than what we'll talk about later. So typically your end result will be a larger onion. Taste-wise, the exact same, but size-wise, there can be a difference. The other benefit is that you can kind of pull them out at any stage you so desire. So if you want a smaller size onion or you just want the green portion of the onion, you have that option, especially when you're not dealing with an older or a set style onion. The one thing you may run into is if you start these seeds too late, and therefore your onion bulb itself is growing later into the season. This is not beneficial in some cases because a lot of bugs that actually eat and destroy your onion bulb come out in those later months. So if we're starting from seed, we start late, or we end up with some transplant shock where it's taken 2 weeks to try to get going again. You may end up with pests, and those pests may decimate your onion harvest. So that is one of the downsides. For the bulbs, this is obviously a plant that was planted the year previous. Usually mid-summer is when the seeds would be started for these bulbs to be harvested, and then they are cut down in the fall. Once they're cut down in the fall, that is what you get in the store. In an ideal world, when you're selecting the bulb or the set for your garden, you're going to want to make sure to get the smaller ones. So there was actually quite a few studies done by quite a few universities that I found that looked at bulb size or set size versus end result. And almost always, the smaller the initial bulb, the bigger the onion. And I think this probably has to do with stress and just overall development of the plant. So always aim for those smaller bulbs. The other issue with the bulbs is because in our minds we think it's a bulb, it'll come up and it'll grow and it'll turn into onion. It's halfway there already. We tend to plant them too late in the season. Remember, these are cold soil crops, meaning they thrive and do best in cooler soil, both from its ability to capture nutrients, water, photosynthesis, what it just likes to grow in general, all the way to its ability to dodge and dive pests. So we tend to put our bulbs or our sets out later in the summer, probably around the same time we do a lot of our transplanting. However, these tend to not do as well as if we were to plant these early. And by early, I mean once the frost kind of comes out of the ground, it's ready to go. What this is going to do is you're going to end up with a bigger bulb than what you're used to, but you're also going to prevent against disease or pests that may decide to crawl their way through your little bulb. In review, seeds need to be started early. They also need to be placed outside early enough, but you want to try to reduce that transplant shock or any sort of frost damage that may happen as much as possible. Any stunted growth or shock will result in a smaller bulb or potentially pest damage. If we're using bulbs, we want to make sure we actually get them in the soil before June 1st, while the soil is still cold. And we also want to make sure we want to get the smaller bulb. The bigger bulb will result in a smaller end bulb. So the smaller the set to begin with, the better. Overall, It's kind of up to you what you want to do. If you want to waste the space, that's just my personal opinion, then for sure start them from seed. If you want to start them from bulb, it does not matter. The flavor is the same. However, it is noted that typically the set onions are a smaller onion at the end. And that, again, most likely has to do with the stress of ripping that sucker out of the ground mid-growing season. Like, it doesn't even get its first year under a belt. It gets its first 6 months under its belt before it's plucked out of the ground. So just keep that in mind. And if you're in a zone where you can keep these all year long and them not turn to mush, try growing them as a biannual. I'd be interested to know if anyone's doing that, because that'd be cool. And then if you are doing that, let me know what the actual onion tastes like after the second year, if you've ever eaten it. I would imagine it's more of like a woody taste. I don't know. Anyways, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe. I did the opposite. Okay, I'm tired. Clearly, I'm tired. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.